In 1982, the world's most famous car was built by a convicted drug smuggler. John Z. DeLorean didn't just want to build a vehicle, he wanted to craft a legacy that would outshine Detroit's giants. By the time the DMC-12 rolled off the assembly line, the foundation of his empire was already crumbling under a mountain of government debt and unfulfilled promises. To understand how a man who held the keys to General Motors' future ended up in a motel room trading cocaine for his company's survival, we have to look at the intersection of ego, engineering arrogance, and the dark reality of 1980s manufacturing. DeLorean was the golden boy of the automotive industry. He was the youngest division head at GM, responsible for the legendary Pontiac GTO. He wore Italian suits, dated models, and spoke to the media like a rock star. But in 1973, he walked away from $1 million salary to do the impossible, create a dream car that was safe, fuel-efficient, and undeniably cool. The DMC-12 was supposed to be the ethical sports car. Instead, it became a mechanical disaster wrapped in stainless steel. He managed to secure a massive $100 million investment from the British government to build a factory in Dunmurry, Northern Ireland. Why there? Because the British government was desperate to create jobs in a region torn apart by sectarian violence. John DeLorean played the political game perfectly, painting himself as a job creator who would bring prosperity to a war zone. But the reality on the factory floor was vastly different. Most of the workers had never built a car before in their lives. The quality control was non-existent. Doors leaked, paint, when it wasn't stainless steel, peeled, and the engine was woefully underpowered for a car labeled as a high-performance machine. Here is where the ambition turned into a fever dream. The company burned through cash at a rate that would have made a space agency blush. The car's price tag inflated from the promised $12,000 to nearly $25,000. Potential buyers, who had waited years for the sleek, gull-winged icon, were greeted by a vehicle that looked like the future but drove like a relic. Behind the scenes, the management was in total disarray. DeLorean was flying between New York and Belfast, rarely spending enough time to oversee the massive operational rot spreading through his management layers. He was living a lifestyle that cost millions, funded by a company that was technically insolvent before it ever delivered a complete vehicle. In October 1982, the walls finally closed in. The factory was bankrupt, the British government refused to pour in more capital, and the creditors were circling. In a desperate, final-ditch attempt to save the firm from total liquidation, John DeLorean met with an undercover FBI informant. The plan was simple, if completely insane: traffic $24 million worth of cocaine to provide the liquid capital needed to keep the lights on for another month. He was caught on camera, hand on a briefcase of illicit product, famously stating, "It's as good as gold." He was acquitted of the charges years later, successfully arguing entrapment, but the company was already dead. The dream didn't just fade, it evaporated in a cloud of legal fees and public scandal. Even the subsequent fame from the Back to the Future film franchise couldn't save the physical entity. The machines, the tools, and the massive manufacturing facility were dismantled and sold for scrap. The legacy was reduced to a movie prop. If you want to understand how massive companies fall from grace through pure hubris, you have to look at how they treat their own products. While DeLorean focused on the glamour of the brand, he forgot the fundamental truth of manufacturing: if the engine doesn't start, the logo doesn't matter. The collapse of DMC serves as a permanent cautionary tale for every founder who believes that style can compensate for a lack of substance. It is a story of how a billion-dollar vision can be dismantled by the vanity of a single man. If this deep dive into industrial tragedy kept you hooked, you really need to watch our breakdown of how the aviation industry ignored the warnings that led to the grounding of an entire fleet of planes. History is littered with failures, most of them preventable. But be honest, if you were in his position, with your reputation on the line and your entire life's work about to collapse, would you have folded, or would you have risked everything on a final, reckless bet?